Are you feeling lost and oftentimes wonder, will anyone ever find me in this dark place? I feel you, I see you, I was there until I found Jesus and His grace. Welcome to the If It's Just One podcast. I'm your host, Stashani Atkins. I must admit I don't have it all together, but I believe with a little encouragement we will make it to heaven together. We oftentimes underestimate the power of one, but Jesus left the 99 for one. And so, if this podcast only reaches one person, that's all that matters. This podcast will be focused on encouraging you, my brothers and sisters, to rise above the challenges that prevent us from being who God has called us to be. Stay tuned. We really need each other. Hello guys, welcome back to another episode. This is episode 14 entitled Do Not Compromise. Not compromising means we will never do anything that goes against our principles. Not compromising means we will stay true to who we are. There's a quote that says that those who stand for nothing will fall for anything, and that is so true. Sometimes in our relationships we're forced to compromise. We're forced to neglect our values and our standards to please people. This even happens in our spiritual relationship. Sometimes the devil tries to convince us not to stay true to our Christian values. Sometimes you might hit a rough patch on your Christian journey where it feels like nothing is working out. You have done everything the way the Bible says you should do it, and you still get the short end of the stick. And when you look, you see people who are not even living a godly life prospering. In a situation like this, you might be tempted to throw in the towel. You might be tempted to compromise your faith in God. But if you're in this situation today, I am encouraging you to continue to hold on to God's unchanging hands, because one thing I can tell you is that God never fails. He might take a little longer than we expect, but that doesn't mean He has failed. He might not give us what we want, but that doesn't mean He has failed. I once heard someone said, God is intentional. He is always doing something. And even if He's not doing anything, He is still doing something. Let this encourage you today, because when it seems like God is not doing anything in your life, He is doing something. Maybe you just can't perceive it yet. Hear what King David said in Psalms 37 verse 25. I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. Now look at that. Let these words spoken by David marinate in your heart today. The righteous is never forsaken, and his children will never beg bread. God is a provider, and if you continue to believe in Him, you will start to live these very words spoken by David. I won't pretend as if it does not get rough at times. Even I face challenging times, but I can tell you one thing, He is always on time. He might not be early for us, but trust me, when He do come through, we have to admit He came through the right time. Just like how He showed up when Lazarus was dead. Sometimes He shows up in our lives when things are dead, because in this way He can be glorified. So sometimes He loves to show up when our bank accounts are empty and deadlines have passed, because in that way He can be glorified. In that way we can know He is truly a provider and He will never let us down. So do not compromise, because eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard of what God will do in your life. There is a powerful story of 3 Hebrew boys in the Bible who did not compromise their faith in God. This story can be found in Daniel chapter 3. So in the story, there was a king called Nebuchadnezzar. He was the king of Babylon, and he made a gold idol, and he wanted the people to bow down to the idol, and anyone who refused would be thrown in the fiery furnace. Now the people of Israel were taken captive, and so they were living in Babylon at the time. Among them were 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These young men believed in the true and living God and refused to worship the idol he made. These young men were determined. Imagine hearing you would be thrown in a fiery furnace, but they still did not compromise. The Bible said the king ordered for the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and he ordered that the 3 young men be thrown in the fire. As a matter of fact, the Bible said the fire was so hot that it killed the man who threw them in the fire. The king thought they would die, but what happened next shocked him. Instead of seeing 3 persons in the fire, he saw 4, and the 4th person looked like the Son of God. And so the king ordered them to come out, and when they came out, the Bible said they were not hurt at all. They had not been burned, and they didn't even smell like smoke. And as a result, the king made a law that everyone should honor the God of these 3 young men, because no other God can deliver like he does. I believe this story is for someone today. Maybe you might be on the brink of compromising, but may this encourage you. Sometimes we might be thrown in the fire because we are not willing to compromise. We might lose a job because we're not willing to compromise. We might lose a friend because we're not willing to compromise. Or we might even lose a relationship because we're not willing to compromise. Sometimes we might even want to compromise because we fear the fire. But the beautiful thing about being thrown in the fire is that we get to realize that Jesus is in the fire with us, and we will come out victorious. Sometimes it's the people who throw us in the fire ends up getting destroyed, because the Bible says those who believe in God shall never be ashamed. So never fear the fire, because when you choose to go through the fire for Jesus' sake, you shall not be burned. You will walk out untouched. You will not look like what you have been through. You will not smell like what you have been through. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den because he refused to stop praying to God. But God delivered him from the mouth of the lions. And so when we find ourselves in our own dens because we refuse to compromise, we can rest assured that God will make a way out for us. Even in our dating relationships, people may want us to compromise. They may want us to compromise our Christian values in order to be with them. But if you have to walk away from God to be in a relationship, then that relationship is not from God. And as Christians, we might feel that God is preventing us from receiving love, because the only reason we're still single is because we're a Christian. But as we become more spiritually mature, we will realize it's God's protection and not prevention. Even in our friendships, we might be forced to compromise our values, or even at our workplace. But remember that on Christ the solid rock we stand, and all other ground is sinking sand. And anything that pulls us from God is not from God. So if there's anyone struggling to stay true to who you are and what you believe in, I encourage you to hold on. It's not always easy, because sometimes it looks as if we will never get it, or we will never become that person if we don't compromise. But that's a lie from the devil. He wants it to look as if that's the only way, but we serve a God who makes a way in the wilderness and who makes rivers in the deserts. And when it looks like it's not possible, look to God, because He can do the impossible. And so, if you feel as if you have already compromised, I see you, I feel you, but we serve a gracious, forgiving God who has open arms to receive us. Your little compromise is nothing compared to God's love. So if you're staying far from Him because you think you have done Him wrong, I dare you to come to Him today and confess everything before Him, for He is a God who listens, and He does not listen to condemn, but He listens to forgive. So say no to compromise, and say yes to Jesus, for He has already left the 99 to receive you. So, if you have a testimony of how God has helped you overcome the temptation to compromise, please feel free to share in the comment section. If this episode has encouraged you, please like and subscribe and share with someone you think it will encourage. See you in the next episode. And remember, we need Jesus and we need each other.